The primary flight display, PFD, displays all the normal primary flight indications: attitude, airspeed, altitude, vertical speed, heading, and track. Notice that the indicators are laid out in a conventional instrument T configuration. The PFD also displays other information. The upper part of the display provides information to the pilots on the Flight Management and Guidance System, FMGS. The area is known as the Flight Mode Annunciator, FMA. You will learn more about the FMA in the Autoflight modules. A Flight Director push button on the EFIS control panel enables the pilots to switch the Flight Director display on. Notice that there is an indication on the FMA when the flight directors are switched on. Caution! Both flight directors must be switched on or off. You should never fly with only one flight director selected on. When below 2,500 feet, a digital radio altimeter is displayed. In this module, we will concentrate on the primary flight indications. Let's start with attitude. Attitude information is shown in the center of the display. The attitude indicator works in the normal sense. The aircraft is represented by 3 black and yellow symbols, which remain fixed. There is a graduated scale for pitch angle above and below the horizon. Bank angle is displayed at the top of the indicator. Each graduation represents 10 degrees angle of bank. The roll index triangle moves against a fixed scale to show the angle of bank. To show both the pitch and bank indications in use, let's look at the indication for a climbing turn. In this example, the aircraft is in a 20-degree banked turn to the left with a nose-up pitch attitude of 10 degrees. Below the roll index is a side slip index. This index moves to indicate side slip and replaces the old-fashioned slip ball. When the Flight Director push button on the EFIS control panel is selected, Flight Director indications are superimposed onto the attitude indicator. In the example shown, the Flight Director is centered. The vertical line is the Flight Director roll bar, while the horizontal line is the pitch bar. Let's look at an example of the Flight Director in use. In this example, the Flight Director is directing a pitch up and roll to the right. Once the aircraft has achieved the required pitch and bank, the Flight Director bars will once again be centered. Now let's look at the airspeed indications on the PFD. The speed scale moves behind a fixed yellow reference line and triangle. In the example shown, the indicated airspeed is steady at 250 knots. When the aircraft is accelerating or decelerating, a speed trend arrow appears. This arrow shows the value that will be attained in 10 seconds if the acceleration remains constant. In the example shown, the aircraft will decelerate to 240 knots in 10 seconds. The use of the speed trend arrow will be demonstrated during your simulator training. When the Flight Management and Guidance System, FMGS, is controlling the airspeed, a magenta target airspeed triangle appears. This is normally referred to as the managed speed. In the example shown, the managed target airspeed is 240 knots, and the aircraft is decelerating towards that speed. If the target airspeed is selected manually, a blue triangle appears. This is normally referred to as selected speed. In the example shown, a selected airspeed of 260 knots has been set and the aircraft is accelerating towards it. Manual speed selection is achieved by a rotary selector on the FCU panel. Just above the selector is the indication of the selected speed. As a general rule on the PFD, a magenta indication means managed, and a blue indication means selected. You will see this in the examples that follow. To look at the various other indications on the airspeed scale, we will run through a typical flight profile. We will assume a departure with the flaps in position 2. You will learn about the various flap and slat configurations in the flight control modules. During the takeoff roll, a blue decision speed, V1, and a magenta, V2 speed are shown. Notice that since these speeds are beyond the visible scale, they are shown as numbers. As the takeoff progresses, V1, VR, and V2 indications appear on the speed scale as a blue 1, a blue circle, and a magenta triangle. Just after liftoff, the magenta target speed remains at V2. The speed demanded by the flight director will be V2 plus 10 knots. The minimum flap retraction speed is shown by a green F. This is referred to as F speed. The flap limit speed, VFE, is shown by a red and black strip at the top of the speed scale. At acceleration altitude, the target speed jumps to 250 knots, and the aircraft is accelerated toward that speed. Notice that since this speed is beyond the scale, it is shown above the scale as a number. The aircraft is now above the minimum flap retraction speed and accelerating. The flaps can now be retracted to position 1. Click on the flap lever to select position 1. The F speed indication is replaced with an S speed indication. This is the minimum slat retraction speed. Notice that the VFE has increased to reflect the limiting speed for flap position 1. The aircraft is now above S speed and accelerating, so the flaps can be fully retracted. Click on the flap lever. After flap retraction, the aircraft is clean. The aircraft stabilizes at 250 knots. Notice that the target speed is in line with speed reference line. When cleared to accelerate to climb speed, the target speed jumps to approximately 290 knots. Once again, the speed trend arrow appears. Once the speed has stabilized at climb speed, the red and black Vmax indication will be visible. Below approximately 30,000 feet, the Vmax indication is fixed at 330 knots to represent VMO. A Mach indication appears below the speed scale once the speed is above the equivalent of Mach 0.5. Above approximately 30,000 feet, the Vmax indication becomes the airspeed equivalent to the Mach limit speed, MMO, Mach 0.86. In the example shown, the aircraft is cruising at Mach 0.82, and the indicated Vmax of 292 knots represents the equivalent of Mach 0.86. A green circle indicates the best lift-drag ratio speed for the aircraft in clean configuration. This speed is known as green dot speed. During an FMGS computed managed descent, the magenta triangle indicates the target speed. The double magenta bar indicates the speed range. In the example shown, the target speed is 295 knots. The speed will vary between the two speed range indicators as the aircraft maintains the required descent profile. Managed descent profiles will be studied in depth in the autoflight modules.
Following initial deceleration to 250 knots, there is an indication of the next flap limiting speed, VFE next. In this case, the next flap setting is 1, so an indication is shown at 240 knots. The VFE next indication will be visible, provided the aircraft is below 20,000 feet. Green dot speed may also be visible.
A further deceleration to green dot speed takes the airspeed below the VFE for the first flap selection. Flap 1 can now be selected. Notice that a target speed of 134 knots has appeared. This represents the approach speed target. Click on the flap lever. Once the flap lever is in position 1, S speed, VFE next, and the flap limit speed indications will appear. The speed will decrease towards S speed. Notice that at S speed, the aircraft is below the limit speed for the next flap setting, VFE next. Flap 2 can now be selected. Click on the flap lever. As soon as the flap lever is in position 2, S speed is removed. F speed and a new VFE next indications will appear. The flap limit speed will move to a new limit. Notice that the approach speed target, VApproach, has now appeared as a magenta triangle. The aircraft will continue decelerating towards F speed. By reducing towards F speed, the aircraft will be below the VFE for the next flap setting. Flap 3 can now be set. Click on the flap lever. As before, VFE next and VFE move to reflect the new flap position. Flap full can now be selected. Click on the flap lever. The aircraft will eventually stabilize at VApproach, and the VFE will be adjusted to reflect full flap. There are indications associated with speed and angle of attack protections. These protection indications will be discussed in the flight control modules. Once the aircraft lands, all additional speed indications are removed, apart from the speed trend arrow. Having thoroughly studied the airspeed indications, you will study the altitude, vertical speed, and heading indications in the next module.